can't. Get out. Oh my God.
Hello. Welcome back to the Madison channel. I, of course, am Madison, and today we have a special Pride episode of True Crime in Society, where we will be discussing the AIDS epidemic and why I think it's a true crime story. Let's get to it. For those of you who are new here, I am Madison. This is a Madison channel. We do dark history, true crime, social commentary, you name it, we do it. There is a bunch of content for you to catch up on, so feel free to binge the content on the channel. If you like this video, comment, like the video. Even if you don't like it, comment down below. It helps this video in the algorithm. Any interaction is very helpful and meaningful. And hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you can be notified when I post a new video. For those of you who are returning, hi, how are you? It's been a while. I love you. I miss you. There's so much to catch up on, but if you wouldn't mind putting a little like or putting a little comment down below, any interaction with this video for either group of you would be so important to me. So thank you so much, and do what you're supposed to do. Okay, all of my socials are in the description below. Feel free to follow, subscribe, all of those things. So check me out. All the information is down below. Before we get into this very special Pride episode of True Crime in Society, I just want to have a little bit of a come to Jesus moment with the people who are subscribed. A little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of updates, a little bit of all of that kind of in the mix. And if you're new here, feel free to skip to where I start talking about the AIDS epidemic if you want to, but if you want to stay and be a part of the family and hear what we have going on, you feel free to stay. I know, I've been gone for some weeks now. My last episode was the Miley Massacre one, a very emotional one to do, but thank you guys for all the people who watched it, all of the things. Mom is going through her late midlife crisis. I wouldn't say it's a midlife crisis. It's a get up bitch and get your life together and start being an adult. You're about to be 30 situation that's going on with me and everything. And I'm kind of on this kick of self-improvement. You know, if I attempted to do the 75 hard, that will be a video for another day. But right now I'm on a lifestyle shift. I'm in the midst of trying to lose weight. Again, we'll be talking about that in another video. But I guess what's most pertaining to you guys is I will be taking a bit of a hiatus. I will be back in a few months, but I'm going to be taking a bit of a hiatus to work on myself and work on this channel. When you work alone and you build something alone, sometimes you need to remove stuff from your plate to kind of hyper fixate on the things that you really want to elevate. And for me, the elevation is not only a personal one, but it's a professional one with this channel. I have been for a long time very, very inspired by the YouTuber Intellectual Media. She is honestly what I strive to be. If you don't know who she is this amazing like Twitch streamer, sex worker, YouTube intellectual historian who I've been following for some years now. And she makes these series where it's like a video essay, but a video essay with 12 episodes. It's like a season of something. And I've always enjoyed that kind of way to produce media on YouTube, because it allows for you to not be confined to one video to talk about a specific topic, and you can really go into the deep dive of all these different aspects of one particular topic. She did one recently. She just finished one called Lectual Does the 80s, and she kind of talks about just like really big events that happened into the 1980s, things that forever shaped our country, and just, you know, from pop culture stuff to historical stuff to, you know, activist stuff, all of that. But it's like a historical archive of the 1980s that has international things, national things, just things that the detail is impeccable. And after she did that and I watched every episode, I was kind of like, I'm inspired to reframe how this channel exists. Now, for a lot of you, I've been kind of throwing a bunch of things against the wall. I do social commentary, and I'm still going to. I do obviously more traditional true crime episodes, and I do more of this like dark history kind of thing. If you're into Bailey Sarian kind of vibe, where it's like bordering true crime, but it's definitely me telling you about a historical moment. And all of that kind of got to me, and I was kind of like, okay, how can I like rebrand and kind of become more of a solidified brand with my channel and all of that. And what came to mind was Intellectual Media's 80 series, and I kind of was like, I want to do that with a historical topic, with one singular historical topic, where I do extensive research around all these different aspects of this one particular topic, but tell each episode like a true crime story. So I kind of started working and thinking, and I decided to create a series called Would You Care If It Was a True Crime Story? Or the title's still working. Untitled, let's say untitled, but somewhere around that vein where it's like, would you care if it's true crime, blah, 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 where I talk about historical events that affect BIPOC individuals that have affected our entire existence, especially particularly in this country as well as internationally, in massive detail in this massive season of a video essay to talk about this one thing. And I found the historical topic that I'm gonna talk about. I'm really excited. A little hint, I guess, is my skin color. I hope that helps. But I started the process of breaking down that topic into 30 individual videos. And I think and my plan is to script them out. I've already outlined all of them. My plan is to script out the 30 videos, film the 30 videos, edit the 30 videos, and upload them onto YouTube, throughout for next year's content and stuff like that. And then I will pop in. So if there is a Kanye West thing, or if there is something that's going on that I feel really pulled to have a commentary about, like the Shanquella Robinson case or something like that, I will pop in and do a live or do a video on it. But for the most part, I want to kind of tighten up the way I brand this channel and use both the true crime lens while talking about historical topics and kind of do that. So that's where I'm going. That's the direction we're going in. I'm really excited. I've started 30 videos. I've already outlined them. I'm really like hyped up on like passion and excitement. So that's where I'm gonna be in terms of probably until the end of the year doing all of that stuff. Now, that being said, I have a total of 53 hour-long videos on this channel. If you've not watched all 53 of them, please watch them, because you will get my perspective, my point of view, and I have some fucking great content. There's no part of me that's ashamed of the content that I've put out. I just think I need to tighten up the brand and do a rebrand and elevate. On top of that, that includes having an intro, having an end card, having music. That includes me investing in new editing software, not just using iMovie, and a course to teach me how to use it. So all of this is going to be part of my, like, I'm in a cocooning era where I'm like just trying to become my sexiest, smartest, most fulfilled self before 30. And that's just gonna take really intense work right now for me. And so I will not be uploading weekly until probably next year. That being said, if something happens, like I said, I might hop on live, do a really casual pajama live, you know what it's giving. But I just want you guys to know, and I just want to be super transparent with you. When I come back with real content and videos, this YouTube channel will be out of this fucking world. It's going to be, just expect amazingness. So anyway, that's where I'm at. that's where I've been. That's what I just thought I had to address that before like popping in. And I just thought I wanted to come on video and just say, here's my last video, that I promised on my community page for Pride Month. I wanted to honor Pride Month because I wanted to do this episode last year, but I just didn't research enough to do it. But now I am here this year to do it. But I wanted to just let you guys know, this is where I've been, this is what's going on, your girl's okay, but she's trying to be 30, flirty, and thriving at 27. So I need to do some hard work on me, building myself up, healing, and really putting my whole badussi into this YouTube channel rebrand. So that's what I'm doing. Love you guys. Thank you for the ongoing support. I hope you stick with me. I hope you binge watch all my old content while I'm not posting videos regularly. Again, if you want to follow that journey, I will be starting a new series on TikTok, kind of documenting this journey of this rebrand for me. So if you want to follow that journey, hit the description box below and I will be posting about that there. Mwah. Going live there and all of that. Mwah, mwah. Love you. Okay, now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, I think it's time to get into this True Crime in Society episode where we're talking about the AIDS epidemic as a true crime story. And I'm about to rip Ronald Reagan a new asshole for the next hour straight. Mwah. See you there. So, a couple things I want to address before we get into this episode. First, I think in a time where queer history, queer rights are being banned and taken away, more and more of the bottom half of this country is looking very fascist as we speak. I think it's important to discuss the truth of the history of marginalized communities while we are under attack. And I thought my inspiration for doing this is not to be disrespectful for those who lost their lives during the AIDS epidemic, but it's to point out that this was not just a historical occurrence that nobody expected and nobody was prepared for. This was a deliberate neglect on the part of the Reagan administration and the United States government because of their general disdain for queer people in terms of their inaction of solving this problem. We have all just lived through a pandemic, not an epidemic, but a pandemic in 2020. And you have to understand how important, now you can understand how important government intervention and government response is in those types of health crisis situations. If Donald Trump never acknowledged that COVID existed for 5 years and then let it run rampant, killing everybody, not doing anything to stop it, that would be a problem. And that is exactly how Ronald Reagan and his administration responded to the AIDS epidemic and the news of AIDS existing because of the specific people that were being affected first, which were gay men and intravenous drug users. Because there's a hierarchy of value in our society, gays and drug users are at, near the bottom of the totem pole when we talk about social activities, right? Especially in this particular time of this country. And I'm going to get into more detail about where we were and why Reagan is this and why it's important to talk about Reagan. But I just want you guys to understand, because we just lived through something that was scary and earth-shattering and people were dropping dead all around us and all of that. Imagine if nobody said anything for 5 years and just let people die. And that is exactly the experience that the queer community had with AIDS and the drug user community had with AIDS because of this country's fascist Christian values. Now, on a personal note, there's no one in my life that has had AIDS, not that I know of, at least that they haven't disclosed it to me. But I remember my first time really learning and understanding AIDS was not from the perspective of oh, it's a queer disease, it's for gay men get AIDS, da 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 da. It was more from, long story, but I'll make it short. I wanted to be a doctor when I was still in high school. In my junior year of high school, UCLA invited me to be a part of this like scholar program where you spend some weeks at UCLA, live in the dorms with a bunch of other kids your age, and you learn about going to medical school and what that is. You tour different medical schools and you watch a surgery live and you do all this crazy stuff. It was like really cool. It was an experience that I loved. Made a bunch of friends, but anyway, a person came in to speak to us. Every group had a specific person come and speak to us, and the person that came in was this woman, and she was talking to us about how she was diagnosed with AIDS, and what it has done to her body and when, and all the effects and all of that kind of stuff from a medical perspective, because that was what the whole thing was about. And she told this like insane story about this like super cheater, terrible Jamaican boyfriend that she had that like cheated on her and beat her and was abusive and horrible and essentially gave her AIDS, and how different people in her life kind of started to mistreat her because they didn't have the knowledge about how AIDS was spread, and just different things in her life and different things and issues, things that she has to, illnesses that she has, chronic illnesses that she has as a result of her AIDS diagnosis. And that was the first time that I was like really face to face with somebody that was dealing with AIDS. And I just want to commend her for her bravery, coming into a bunch of high schoolers to talk about such a serious matter. What must have been, it just takes a lot of bravery to be very loud and proud about your status. But that was the first time I was like really introduced to what it was scientifically, how it affected people, and all of that kind of thing. Then that same summer, I watched a documentary called We Were Here, which is, if you need to cry, I don't even know what to say, but it was like one of the most fundamental documentaries in my life. It is emotional, it breaks your heart, and it is basically, the title is so simple, We Were Here, but it's basically how an entire generation of gay men were wiped out because of how this endemic was handled by the United States government and all of that kind of thing. So this idea of AIDS and inaction by the government has always been something that's played in my mind. I always knew it happened. I always had that history in my mind. And when I had decided to start this YouTube channel, it was a story that I really wanted to tell. My first year, I didn't have enough time to get my ducks in a row to tell it. That's why I was pushing to just like have this be my final episode and have it be up before Pride Month is over, because I want to really have a real talk about AIDS and how it is a true crime story, and how all those men who died of AIDS in that way during the 1980s, during the Reagan administration specifically, due to the just abhorrent neglect because of who these men were, who these people were, how they lived their lives, the absolute disdain for human life that isn't white and Christian. These people were deliberately murdered, and there's a lot of blood on the hands of the United States government because of that, because of those prejudices. And I'm so happy so many strides have happened when it comes to being HIV positive, and even being able to live such a long and healthy life now with HIV, being HIV positive and knowing your status, all the medication, the PrEP, the this that has come out in the recent years, and how not so long ago the entire country was turning their back on the gay community because of AIDS and wanting them to die, and saying that this was God, laying judgment on them because of their lifestyle. I don't want to ever forget that part of the history. I think it's always important to know, if you're ever confused as to why we are in the place that we are right now in this country when it comes to queer lawmaking and the fascism that's, showing its head in Texas and Florida and all of these places. Just a few years ago, a few decades ago, this country was fully comfortable with letting gay people die because of AIDS, because they only thought it affected them. It was only when people like Magic Johnson and Ryan White, who we will get into, got AIDS that people started to say, oh, anyone can get it. Maybe we should fix it. That is the only reason why. When it was just gay men and drug users, a lot of people turned their backs, didn't give a damn about their life at all. So it's important that we come to Jesus, we have this conversation, because we cannot forget this history. It is a part of why the laws are being created and all of this stuff. This homophobic, anti-queer kind of legislation that's being pushed right now, erasure kind of thing is being pushed right now, is because is related to how this country dealt with the AIDS crisis. It's so important, and we're going to talk about it today. Okay. Also, happy Pride. And no, I don't think Pride is about AIDS. I just thought it's a perfect month to talk about this. I don't think I need to explain that to the people who watch my videos, right? Happy Pride. Love y'all. So I think it's important that before we really get into the meat and potatoes, the timeline of all of this, let's kind of have a little quick crash course on what AIDS actually is, what the acronym stands for, and what it does to the body and why it is so dangerous and all of that. So let's get into that. I have my notes, so I'm going to read them. Sorry, but I can't memorize this. Let's go. So the AIDS virus, or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, is caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. HIV primarily targets and attacks the immune system, specifically a type of white blood cell called CD4 T cells. These cells play a crucial role in defending the body against infections and diseases. When HIV enters the bloodstream, it seeks out CD4 T cells and attaches itself to a specific receptor on their surface. The virus then fuses with the cell and releases its genetic material, RNA, into the cell's cytoplasm. This RNA is converted into DNA by an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. Anyway, the newly formed viral DNA is transported to the nucleus of the CD4 T cell, where it integrates into the cell's DNA, which once integrated, the virus can remain dormant or become active. When it becomes active, it hijacks the cell's machinery to produce more HIV particles, which can then infect other CD4 T cells. As the virus replicates, it gradually weakens the immune system by destroying CD4 T cells. This progressive destruction of the immune system leaves the body vulnerable to opportunistic infections and diseases that a healthy immune system would typically be able to fight off. So if you're kind of confused, like me getting pneumonia now as a healthy person that isn't HIV positive, I might be sick, I might be down, I might have to take medication, but my body will be able to fight it off. If an HIV positive person gets, pneumonia, it would be the worst case of pneumonia, and the body would have such a difficult time fighting it off because their CD4 T cells would be completely destroyed due to the HIV virus. Does that make sense? I think we're on the same page. Great. It's important to note that HIV is primarily transmitted through specific bodily fluids, including blood, semen, and vaginal fluids, and breast milk. I didn't know the breast milk part. The most common modes of transmission include unprotected sexual intercourse, sharing contaminated needles, and transmission from an infected mother to her child during childbirth or breastfeeding. While HIV can be a devastating virus, it's crucial to emphasize that with proper medical care and treatment, people living with HIV can lead long and healthy lives. Advances in antiviral therapy have significantly improved the management of the virus and reduced the risk of transmission. Now that we have a basic understanding of what HIV, AIDS, and all of that is, how it affects the body, the sicknesses and the illnesses that come with it, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with understanding what's actually happening to these individuals that we will be talking about. But yeah, that is what HIV is. That is what AIDS is. Excuse me. So, we start this conversation in 1981. In 1981, there started to be people started to notice specific aggressive illnesses within gay men in major cities in the United States and internationally that just hit the scene like wildfire. So it was affecting gay men primarily, at least that's what they were starting to get as the data started to trickle out. It was mysterious. Nobody understood what was happening. And that was 1981. Now, in 1981, there weren't a lot of deaths. You know, people were still kind of late to the party about what this was and what was going on. There were different names for it. People just, there wasn't a consensus of what it was called and how big of a problem this actually was. So the death toll remained kind of in the hundreds. It had just hit the scene at that point. But this is kind of the start of the frenzy because people started to get sick all of a sudden, and it just as we've lived through, a lot of times when these things start to happen, people start to get sick with similar symptoms, and everyone has to play the deduction game about where, how, why, what it is, and kind of name it if it hasn't been named before. And so this is where we're at. People, particularly gay men, started to get very, 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 very ill and started to pass away in 1981. And the correlation between gay men was a quick correlation to find because those were the people who were primarily affected at this point. So in 1982 is when the CDC coined the term acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS as we know it now. That's when they coined the term. Around this time, a little under 1,000 people had died from AIDS. But importantly, this is where Ronald Reagan starts to get briefed and his administration starts to get briefed about the existence of AIDS, who it's primarily, affecting, and all of this. So 1982, keep that date in mind, is when Ronald Reagan is first briefed about the existence of AIDS, okay? So in 1983, the HIV virus is discovered as the cause of what leads to AIDS. So they basically, what happened was in 1981, when the men started to show their symptoms, that is when probably the dormant HIV virus that was in the CD4 T cells became active and then started to slowly destruct the quality of the white blood cells in these men's systems. So they were showing really big, really intense symptoms. They were getting really sick. And, because no one knew what was going on or how to stop it, these men were showing AIDS, were in full-blown AIDS mode and not just HIV positive. It wasn't until 1983 that French scientists discovered that there was a virus causing AIDS. Okay, so the virus, human immunodeficiency virus, which is HIV, is what was discovered in 1983 by these French scientists. And so we're slowly starting to peel apart what's going on. Again, that is 2 years' time. The death toll had already risen to, let me just double check. Yes, the death toll had already risen to over 2,000 people. But at this point in time, they're starting to chip away about what's actually happening and doing research on what AIDS is and how it materializes and stuff like that. Now, Ronald Reagan still refuses or just doesn't publicly acknowledge at all the existence of AIDS, what he knows about AIDS, what his administration is doing in regards to AIDS. This conversation topic is not something that is even broached with Ronald Reagan. So the French scientists make this huge discovery, and that's shared with obviously American scientists, but the American government as a whole kind of didn't care. They didn't care. They knew this was happening. The administration knew that this was affecting gay men. They knew all of this. They knew all of this stuff. They were briefed on and up to date on all of the information going on with what was happening and what was building and the severity of the illness. But they were pretty much indifferent because the people that it was affecting right at that moment were drug abusers as well as gay men. So not only did Reagan never publicly acknowledge it, didn't care to, this is 2 years in at this point. People, the death toll is growing exponentially with every year, but the entire American government was pretty indifferent about the HIV discovery. So yeah. Now, 1984 was an interesting year, and this is where things start to shift because this is where the American public is introduced to Ryan White. Now, Ryan White, let me make sure. Yes. Okay. Ryan White was a teenager from Kokomo, Indiana. He became a prominent figure of the AIDS movement in 1984 because at 13, a hemophiliac, was getting a blood infusion, and he was given blood that had AIDS in it. So he got AIDS from a blood transfusion. Now, as we know, I think it was this year, blood banks started to open up the possibility for gay men to donate blood. Again, all of that ban from gay people donating blood and having the ability to donate their blood freely to our blood banks is because of this situation with Ryan White. Because of someone unknowingly probably had AIDS, donated blood, and this kid got it. So, yeah, this was a big moment because this kind of started to shatter a little bit the outside perception of how people got AIDS and who got AIDS, because this young kid who's only 13 got AIDS because he went to the doctor's office and got a blood transfusion because he was a hemophiliac. But, people in their mind at this time in America were like, only the gays and the drug users get it, so we don't give a damn. This became national attention, one, because of the way he got it, the fact that he was 13 years old, the fact that he, it was obvious that he wasn't this young gay kid having a ton of gay unprotected sex. He got it from a blood transfusion. But he was facing discrimination from his school, from his local community, and his parents were trying to figure out, they wouldn't let him go to school because he had AIDS and all of this stuff. And so he became this very, very prominent figure in United States culture and AIDS awareness and all of that in 1984 because of the terrible treatment he was getting. Now, in 1990, they signed the CARES Act into law, which kind of addresses some of the concerns that he was dealing with Ryan and how he got AIDS and, protections and stuff like that. But he basically was allotted to be this huge figure in the AIDS activist community because of how he got AIDS and how his story started to change the public perception around AIDS. Mind you, this is 1984. Unfortunately, Ryan passed away in 1990 at 18, right before the CARES Act actually made it into law. We will get there in the timeline. But Ryan and his AIDS diagnosis was a huge marker of the time in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic. So in 1985, thousands of people have gotten AIDS. Thousands of people are starting to die. It's becoming really dire. And if you've ever seen the documentary We Were Here, just imagine, like, a lot of it took place in San Francisco. There's a lot of stories of people who lived in San Francisco and New York, respectively. But your entire gay community, because San Francisco has always been very queer. It's been a safe haven for the queers on the West Coast, as New York has been a safe haven for the queers on the East Coast. But imagine your community and your lover's dying, your best friend's diagnosed, you don't know what's going on, the government isn't even talking about it, the president isn't even publicly acknowledging that this is a problem that's existing, even though when he got into office, he was immediately briefed about the situation. He's been up to date, up to breast about all the new happenings of what's going on with the AIDS research and trying to figure out a cure that have been going on since 1981. He just refuses to acknowledge that it's even a problem at all. So you're sitting here and everyone around you in your community is dropping fucking dead. And you don't know if you're next. You don't know if you've given it to somebody. You don't know what's going on. You don't know if you'll have any community to speak of in the next year. People were talking in that documentary about going to like 15 funerals in a year. Like, think about that. And it's like your best friend and you're in your early 20s and they're just dead. So this is what's going on, and still the American government refuses to publicly say anything, publicly do anything, try and make any kind of discussion about the discrimination that people were getting. You know, gay people were suffering from a lot of, gay men particularly were suffering from a lot of discrimination. If you had AIDS, a lot of people lost their housing, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people, because there was such a fear, and we're gonna get into that right after we finish this, but there was just this fear about AIDS and this misinformation like COVID. The misinformation campaign was going, and also the Christian fundamentalist judgmental campaign was working at the same time. And all of that is underscored because Ronald Reagan won't ever publicly acknowledge that AIDS is a thing, AIDS is happening, people are dying, this is real. And we're throwing all our money and power to try and help with the research. He never acknowledged it. Okay. So, yeah. So the epidemic started to accelerate, and around over 12,000 people died by 1985. So things are really starting to get serious, and people are really starting to get scared. And this is when activists like Larry Kramer started ACT UP. And ACT UP was a group of activists who were trying to get funding and push for legislation on AIDS research and trying to find a cure for AIDS. So they do these big demonstrations. If you've ever seen Pose, they did the die-in at the cathedral, and they did something like they put a condom on a person's a senator's house and stuff like that. Like, they did these very elaborate, very big statements to kind of force the conversation of AIDS and force the conversation that people were dropping dead like flies, and nobody was doing anything about it. 1986 is a big year. So in 1986, the AIDS Memorial Quilt happened, which was a demonstration where there is, I mean, I will insert pictures, and it is chilling. But basically, it was a demonstration to show how many, the scope of people who had died already of AIDS. And each quilt, or each part of each quilt, was meant to represent a specific person who had passed away. And it was like this big demonstration and really put you in perspective. And this is 1986 at this point, about how many people had died, how many people's lives have been affected, what was going on in these communities. And everyone, it was a huge, huge thing. Very emotional. Child, I don't want to get into it or else I'll cry. Very emotional, but a beautiful, beautiful tribute, honestly. Truly beautiful, but truly chilling. around this time, the death toll has risen to people, some say 19,000, some people say in 1986 it had already crossed over to the 20,000 mark. So that's a lot of people. And I understand that our perspective is shifted because of the pandemic, and we're like, 1 million people died, like that's nothing. But honey, in this time, in these communities with these marginalized people, 20,000 lives, right? In primarily it's in the gay community or the drug user community or whatever. 20,000 lives, that's a lot of people to just be dead within the course of 5 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to think about the scope, you have to think about the proportionality of that, and on top of that, again, the complete inaction that the United States government was showing and putting on full display because of the people it was affecting. Even though people like Ryan White came out and said, I have AIDS, you know, I got it this way. You know, it's something that doesn't necessarily discriminate. You just have to be in contact with somebody, you know what I'm saying? But even still, his family was dealing with discrimination, and that didn't do enough to shake the foundation of the country enough for people to shut up and listen and try and help and pitch in. It didn't do that. And all of that is underscored again by the leader of the free world refusing to acknowledge that thousands, tens of thousands of people have died in 5 years under his administration primarily. And he don't give a damn. He don't give no fucks, okay? He don't give a fuck about it until 1986. 1986 is when Ronald Reagan mentions AIDS publicly for the first time. Now, did I say he made a law or he declared it a federal emergency and funded all the research and gave them all the money and all the best scientists? No. 1986 is when he publicly acknowledges that AIDS is real for the first time. Excuse me? Like, can't we just sit in the ridiculousness of that for a second? He didn't do anything except for acknowledge that AIDS is real, and he knows it's real, and he knows it exists for the first time 5 years after. Okay, 5 years after AIDS started to become a problem in the United States. 4 years after he was initially briefed about the existence of AIDS and what's going on with that. He sat by knowing people were dying in the thousands in these communities and never said not one public acknowledgement about AIDS, not one piece of legislation to fund research, not one acknowledgement that these people's lives matter at all. He didn't give a fuck. And in 1986, he finally acknowledges the existence of AIDS. I'm going to pause here and put a pin in it because I'm about to rant, okay? What a lot of people don't understand is our country has gone through many ebbs and flows between being liberal and being conservative. Like, it's the constant pull between the two-party system that we see. So there's certain eras that are more liberal and there's certain eras that are just more rigid. The 1980s Reagan era is one of those eras that, one, has been the most consequential to marginalized people, period, and our economy, period, and everything, including student debt and all of that, period. Like credit card scores and all of that. All of that is connected to Reagan and this era of conservatism in our country, okay? But a lot of people don't understand why. Historically, when you see that kind of ebb and flow between conservatism and liberalism in this country, it's always a reaction to each other. Many would say the Trump thing that we're dealing with, this fucking psychotic situation we're dealing with right now politically, is a direct response to Obama being elected. So we have these like progressive points and then the white kind of response to that, which always ends up throwing us into this crazy conservative place for a while. Reagan was a response to what was going on in the 1960s and the 1970s. The 1960s and the 1970s was a time of massive social growth, massive activism, massive social change in this country. Before the modern day civil rights movement and all its offshoots, this country wasn't truly a democracy. The fact that all people weren't allowed to vote, the fact that, there's so many laws, separate but equal, segregation, all of this bullshit, this country had not been operating as a true democracy until the 1950s into the 1960s. Those 20 years from about like 1955 to like 1975 were absolutely insane for this country. There was, the free love movement, the hippie movement, the civil rights movement, you had the women's movement, you had the gay rights movement, you had, things like Title IX, abortion, birth control. All of these things were happening in these 20 years. Not to mention, the craziest part was the Vietnam War. And a lot of people don't understand how consequential the Vietnam War was to the way we live our life now, the way we consume news and media now, the way they talk about wars now. That's all related to the Vietnam War and the response it got. But the anti-war movement was big. The free speech movement in Berkeley was happening. There's a lot of shit going on in this country. The younger generation was like, enough, this is bullshit, and they were really standing up and shaking the damn table. Vietnam is this country's biggest shame, even though we should have bigger shames, but it was a terrible, terrible shame. Like, don't get me wrong, child. Like, we have some massive shames. This is the shame, the biggest shame that we publicly acknowledge as a shame. There were so many lies going on. So many instances where leaked documents prove that the United States government was lying to its constituents and to the taxpayers and to all of us at that time. So by the 1980s, the closing out, the late 1970s, the closing out of the 1970s into the early 1980s, this country was deeply wounded, mostly due to the effects of the Vietnam War. The vets were fucked up. The trust in the government was fucked up. The push for not going into wars was a big thing because we needed to heal as a country. And many people thought that they were going to get that healing from Ronald Reagan because he kind of represented traditional Anglo-Saxon Christian values and conservatism. You know what I'm saying? He brought the Jesus back into this country. And a lot of people got wet for that. A lot of people felt like they needed that structure after such a tumultuous 20 years. So Reagan and his subsequent 8 years as president was a direct response to, Watergate and the Vietnam War and all of these activism movements and how the country was changing so fast. He was, and symbolized to a lot of people, the returning to traditional family values, Christian values in a lot of ways. So, quiet as it's kept, child, the blood isn't only on Reagan's hands, it's on the hands of the majority of people in this country who voted for Reagan. And at that time, people were feeling a conservative vibe. People felt like they needed that. People felt like that was the only way to progress in this country because things were just too crazy. You know what I'm saying? Ronald Reagan single-handedly really brought evangelical ism into the Conservative Party in a real mainstay way. That's why I say his presidency is like one of the most consequential because his legislation, Reaganomics, the gold standard thing, credit cards, student loans, all of that happened under him, was created by him. And this country was in a very going back to Jesus, needing to, find value in religion again after all of this movement and change, and we just need to get back to God. So the general vibe of the country was very conservative. So again, not just Reagan, he set the tone, obviously, but the country was vibing with him on that, you guys are gay type tip. you guys are anti-God, this is a choice, and you deserve this. The country was on that type of time. Don't let nobody fool you. There were people who were obviously against that, people who helped, people who, volunteered in these hospitals to care for these men. Shouts out to the lesbians. A lot of that, was happening, but that was grassroots organizing kind of thing. The government as a whole, the country as a whole, was not fucking with anything that wasn't Christian. So the sentiments of the time in this country were, they shouldn't be doing drugs, they shouldn't be gay, then this is what they get, this is what God is showing them, is why they're in this position that they are now, because they are gay and they're going against God. A lot of people had that idea. So for a lot of the country, Reagan not talking about AIDS wasn't nothing to them. They didn't really give a damn about the people dying from AIDS until situations like Ryan White and later Magic Johnson, which we'll get into. But that was kind of the sentiment. You feel me? So I think it's important to say that, because some people would be like, how and why, and that's so illegal, and that's, discrimination and all sorts of stuff. Yes, it was. But the fact that the majority of the country was on this type of time at this point, allowed for this behavior to be normalized, allowed for the full fucking neglect of the health of this country to be fucking, all of that. It allowed for it. He set the tone for people to say, you know what, fuck the gays, fuck the drug users, I don't give a damn. And the unfortunate truth is, people in this country, capitalism and all of that, teach you to be such an individualistic person, and building community and caring about your fellow man, even when something doesn't necessarily affect your life, is lost on a lot of Americans. And we saw that with COVID and the pandemic, this push for no masks, this push for misinformation, people saying that kids wearing masks is child abuse, and the vaccine is this and the vaccine is that, and all of that kind of stuff. We just saw that. Those people that were doing that were the same type of people during this time that didn't give no damn, no fucks about gay people or drug users, because they were anti-Christian. You feel me? It's always that same group. We need to do something about that group of people, child, because they are bringing this whole country down, honey. But we saw that. We saw that already. Been there, done that. We've seen that. And so I think we need to collectively understand that that was the vibe then. And yes, Reagan set the tone, but the sentiments were very much dispelled into this country. And there's historical precedent for that, obviously. But I won't bore you anymore with that. But I think that that's just such an important thing to discuss, period. Point blank, period, child. Also, I quickly want to add in, back to the Ryan White thing. Don't you think it's like, it was only until it was like a straight, who knows, this kid was 13, a seemingly straight 13-year-old boy who was sick, who got it some other way, were people actually down to care? And I think that is more evidence as to what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? By the time Ryan White got sick, AIDS was 3 years in. I think it was at that point like 12,000, over 12,000 people had died. This was a community, this was an issue that was shaking the foundation of the gay, queer communities in big cities at large, and all of that kind of thing. But it wasn't until this kid who got it in this particular way, that doesn't have to do with sex and doesn't have to do with being gay and doesn't have to do with these things, that people actually started to give a damn. You see that? People started to give a damn. It didn't let Reagan, still took Reagan to publicly talk about it, 2 years to publicly talk about it after Ryan White. But things start to shake the foundation. And the truth is, there's no empathy in this country. People don't give a fuck about you unless you're doing stuff or you're related to them and it hurts them or affects them. So, I think that's evidence, all the evidence we need. The fact that this boy was being praised and his family was being praised for their fight against the discrimination and his fight against AIDS. He became this big figure. Not saying he didn't deserve a child. Of course he did. I mean, it's really sad what happened to him. No shade, all tea though. But there are whole communities of people that are screaming for help, who are terrified as every person they know is dropping dead around them. Like, a whole generation of gay men doesn't exist because of what happened and because of this country's response to this shit. You know what I'm saying? And all these communities are in, like, literally a horror movie, begging for some sort of intervention from the government. And this kid gets all the shine because of the convenient way that he got it, versus you having to tell your kid about gay sex and having communications that other people and other ways of living exist. And they're not, and having to confront your Christian values and shit. So I don't know. I mean, we'll get into it. I'm super passionate, but child, let's move on with the timeline before I get stuck here. Okay? But that's just my 2 cents. So in 1987, the FDA finally approves, 6 years down the line, the first antiviral drug to fight against HIV and AIDS and help with that, and that's called AZT. Now, AZT was, semi-effective, but super, super, super fucking expensive. So, again, a lot of people didn't have access to the funds to be able to get this treatment. Again, universal health care is important. All of these things are important. But you know what I'm saying? So, there was, 1987 is when that came out, and people were excited, and it did really help. Don't get me wrong, it did really help, but the accessibility to such things and the barriers in a capitalist system, when your health is now a commodity, you know what I'm saying? These types of barriers, that didn't really do as much as it could have done and save the amount of lives that it could have saved because of the price tag. So again, another function, another institution of the United States government that makes these things fucking impossible. I mean, thank God the COVID vaccine, or even flu vaccines nowadays, are free. But I mean, if you have ever gotten a free vaccine or a free flu shot, you are experiencing the wonders of universal health care. You should not be barred from access to a drug you need to survive. In this case, illness that anyone could receive, anyone could get, by a price tag. That's unethical on so many levels. So not only did Reagan, the year before, finally acknowledge that AIDS existed, 5 years after, things started to really cook up with AIDS, 6 years after it, they finally come out and FDA approves something, child, but the price tag is too steep for most people affected with AIDS to really have it be as effective and as meaningful and powerful as it could have been. I mean, how can you not sit here and tell me that this is not a true crime story? There's a clear victim, there's a clear perpetrator, there's a clear predator, there's a clear all of that. It just so happens that it isn't one-on-one. It's the United States government against marginalized communities. You see what I'm saying? You start to get the message out. You get it. Now, at that point, it is estimated that the death toll had reached 36,000. Some estimates say into the over 40,000. Again, a massive amount of lives, a massive amount of people, okay? And still, we're taking baby steps to addressing the issue. You see what I'm saying? So, again, going back to what we all experienced in the heart of the pandemic, even though we're definitely still in a pandemic, but, people don't want to talk about that, but anyway. In the heart of the pandemic, we were getting updates every day. Stay inside, social distance, 15 feet, wear a mask, wear this type of mask, a cloth mask is fine for this amount, be outside events, social distance events, only this amount of people can be in a space, all of that kind of shit. But that happened very quickly compared to this. We are 6 years into the AIDS epidemic, 40,000 bodies deep at this point, and the country just FDA approved something that might help, but the price tag is too big. Nigga, please. Okay? In 1987, Reagan makes a speech on AIDS, but is criticized for not addressing the urgency of the situation. So he finally makes an actual speech on it. See how the baby steps? In 86, he acknowledges that it existed because a reporter asked him a direct question about it, and he couldn't, shuck and jive away from that. The year after, this nigga makes a whole speech about it, and, finally addresses the seriousness of this situation, but it's just a fucking speech, dude. You're not putting the money. You're not, this is 6 years too late at this point, but you're not putting the money. You're not doing anything else. This is a speech and people are praising you. And the fact that these are historical timelines in this whole timeline, you know what I'm saying? It's not that he signed into law, universally the AZT was free and everyone had access to it. That's not what happened. This nigga just had a speech about it. And because of his lack of action, his neglect for these communities was so egregious. This is history making. The fact that in 1987 he finally made a speech about AIDS, that is history because of how neglectful this man was about AIDS happening and people dying.
AIDS research and our award recipients for their contributions as well. I'm especially pleased a member of the administration is one of tonight's recipients. Dr. Koop is what every Surgeon General should be. He's an honest man, a good doctor, and an advocate for the public health. And I also want to thank other doctors and researchers who aren't here tonight. Those individuals showed genuine courage in the early days of the disease when we didn't know how AIDS was spreading its
Still in 1987, ACT UP is really getting its stride. It's doing those big demonstrations that I kind of described for you. I'll put some pictures in here, obviously. I'm sure I already did. Editing me already did. But ACT UP is really, the pressure's on now, okay? Now that you acknowledge it, now that you made a speech about it and they can put the money where your mouth is, let's do this. Let's get some funding. Let's get some research going. Let's really, really, really try and handle this situation for real. But they still had to do those demonstrations because, again, he wasn't trying to do really nothing but acknowledge that it existed, child. Okay? He wasn't trying to really do nothing. So they still had to be activists in the moment because the funding and the fundraising that they were doing these demonstrations and the awareness that they were creating doing these demonstrations were the backbone of the funding for further research and further development into drugs that could help AIDS. Grassroots, people. Okay. So in 1988, the death toll now is over 50,000. Like I said, things are really, this is like a really, really high point. The AZT is experimental. It's not widely spread. It's not widely dispersed. It's expensive. Not a lot of people have access to it. All of that, and everything's moving at a snail's pace. In 1989, the number of deaths increased to over 68,000. And finally, Reagan is out of office. And this is when George W. Bush, H.W. Bush? The senior one, the one that was only one-term child, the dad. This is when he takes over. So 1989, that Bush takes over from Reagan. So again, and I just want to put this as a disclaimer, Reagan's administration wasn't the entirety of the AIDS epidemic or the AIDS situation. I mean, the AIDS situation is an ongoing living thing. People are diagnosed with HIV all the time. It's just that this particular point is when it was really, discovered and a huge problem and all of this stuff. And there was no medication and there was no understanding. So again, compare it to 2020, when COVID was happening and people were dying and people were sick and no one knew really what the fuck was going on. You know what I'm saying? We're in 1989 now. Reagan spent the majority of his 8 years in the presidency ignoring that AIDS existed, even though the AIDS epidemic started at the start of his presidency. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So that's why he bears the brunt of it, because again, like I said, he sets a tone. He's the leader of the free world. He's not even acknowledging its existence until 1986. Okay, he's president until 1988. He knew about it in 1982. You see what I'm saying? It's just deliberate and it's nasty and it's sick and it's disgusting and it's gross and it's deliberate. And that's the thing that I think makes a true crime story. The deliberate nature by which you neglected these groups of people, and for what? Because they were marginalized, because they weren't Christian, because they weren't like you. You know what I'm saying? So you didn't give a damn. And so here you are finally making a speech about it in 1987, and your whole term is up in 1988. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, let's be for real. You know what I mean? Like, it's just getting, it's like, really, you know? Yes. And so George W. Bush takes control of the presidency. Ryan, who he's also a Republican, but like, you know, at that point, that's a big topic, political topic. You know what I'm saying? So you can't deny it. In 1989, you have to acknowledge that AIDS exists. And at this point, several thousand families, tens of thousands of families have been affected by AIDS. So it's more of a issue now because people are actually feeling it. You know, maybe their son died, or maybe their cousin died, or something. Like, people are actually starting to feel it. So you can't, you know, do the Reagan and like matrix out of conversations about it. Like, you have to talk about it. So obviously that's on the docket of things to fix. 1990, unfortunately, Ryan White passes away, like I had told you. He had suffered with AIDS for 5 years. He died at 18, and he died right before the CARES Act, which is the Ryan White, you know, legislation, was signed into effect, which is really sad, like just months before. So yeah, that's what happened in the 90s, and this is where the endemic peaked. So in 1990, I think the death toll had risen to like 85,000 people. This is like the precipice. This is the uppermost climactic peak of the endemic, of the AIDS endemic, and then everything kind of started to go down from 1990. So, you know, President Bush takes over, signs this into law, Ryan dies, and we're experiencing the highest amount of deaths related to AIDS at this point in time. So obviously it took several years for Reagan to finally do a speech about AIDS, and then we're kind of in hyperdrive as things really, you know, culminate, but everyone's trying to work to make up for lost time, you know. In 1991, this is a year that Magic Johnson officially comes out and says, yo, I have AIDS, I got AIDS, and, you know, more people are starting to understand that it's like not just gay people. There was that model, Gia Carnegie, who passed away because she's a heroin addict, who was coined as the first supermodel, even though Janice Dickinson thinks she is. But anyway, she got AIDS because she was using heroin. And then Magic Johnson, who's a beloved sports player, got AIDS. So the face of AIDS is changing. The people who get AIDS are changing, and people are starting to understand more and not think from a Christian Anglo-Saxon fascist mindset, and more of a mindset that, you know, this is how it's spread, anyone can get it type thing. You know what I'm saying? So this is a point where it really kind of is like, oh shit, like, you know, you can get it from being promiscuous. I need to get tested. I needed to be serious about this type shit, you know? And this marks kind of the start of the rebranding of AIDS into a more universal experience, and not an experience by people who God is punishing, which is crazy. And people think there's a separation of church and state in this bitch, please. So in 91, there's around 40,000, over 40,000 AIDS related deaths. I just wanted to put that statistic out there. In 1992, the year my older sister was born, the AIDS Coalition of Unleashed Power, ACT UP, pressures the government to allocate more funds to AIDS research. And, you know, at this point, the death toll continues to go down. So over 39,000 people died of AIDS that year, you know. But the pressure's on, people are pushing, it's a big topic, it's a central topic, and now the government is doing what it should have been doing I don't know, almost 10 years ago, to handle what this situation is, to educate people and to fund things. So in 1993, the FDA approves the first protease inhibitor. I don't know if that's how you say it, which is like a huge game changer in HIV treatment and all HIV research and everything. And so we start to hit kind of our stride and start to get to a turning point here. Approximately over 38,000 people died of AIDS that year. Obviously this is, worldwide, but as you see from 1990 to 93, even, there's a significant change in the amount of death. And slowly, the government is doing what it's supposed to fucking do. Okay, in 94 there was over 37 AIDS related deaths. So again, we're going incrementally but slowly, we're getting there. So essentially, as we get into the mid-90s, the AIDS related deaths continue to go down, and the research, the funding, the care, the understanding from the public goes up, which is important. As we're starting to round out the 90s and get into the latter half of the 90s. So in 96, the introduction of highly active antiretroviral therapy, or HAART, HAART, was introduced, and that kind of just forever sealed the deal to change, how AIDS was treated, how HIV was treated, the treatment options, the lifespan, all of that started to be, affected, and all of that, which is amazing. And here, the death toll goes into the low 36,000s worldwide again. So we're incrementally coming down, but you see, as more research and more money and more funding is put behind what these people were trying to do, like activists like ACT UP and all that we're trying to do, you see how important that is to, the ability for treatment and care, and the changing of someone's life from it being a death sentence to now you can live 30 years, now you can live 40 years, now you can live to see your grandchildren. You see what I'm saying? It's important to understand that with these types of situations, timing is everything, and we just experienced that. Timing is everything. Not over 1 million people dying in this country, that didn't have to happen, but people's misinformation, the government, the president at the times casting doubt, all of this bullshit caused all those people to die. But the quickness is the really important thing, and the fact that the Reagan administration wouldn't even acknowledge that AIDS existed until 5 years after it started, 4 years after they were briefed about it, and it took them 6 years after it started and 5 years after they were briefed about it for him to make a speech about it. Like, you see all of that death between 1981 to 1987 is just like so needless, but so purposeful and so diabolical, But in 2003, the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEFAR, is launched, providing funding for HIV/AIDS prevention, treatment, and support globally, which is important. In 2003, approximately 16,000 people died worldwide of AIDS, so significant bump down, which is, amazing. People are still getting, it's still a thing, but, it's amazing to see the difference from 96 to 2003. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to talk about the current treatment of AIDS at this point. If you were curious, just so you know, if you have HIV, if you're scared to go get tested, go get tested. You can live a full, amazing life. It's not a death sentence, but this is kind of how the treatment would go. I just wanted to add this in there just for awareness purposes, but I have to read it off the page, so don't get mad at me. I know I've been reading off the page a lot now, but okay, there's a lot of information. Okay. So the antiretroviral therapy, acronym ART, involves taking a combination of HIV medications, typically 3 or more drugs from different classes. These medications work by suppressing the replication of the virus, reducing its levels in the body, and slowing down the progression of HIV infection to AIDS. ART is highly effective in improving immunofunction, reducing HIV-related complications, and prolonging life expectancy. So let me kind of like go through in detail. It's awareness. You need to know this. It's a good information to have. Get tested, you sluts. Come on. Okay. Treatment regimens. The specific ART regimen is tailored to each individual's unique circumstances, including factors such as the stage of HIV infection, viral load, CD4 cell count, potential drug interaction, and the individual's ability to adhere to the treatment. Treatment regimens are continuously evolving as new drugs become available and research advances. Adherence and monitoring. Consistent adherence to ART is crucial for its effectiveness. Regular monitoring of viral load, the amount of HIV in blood, and CD4 cell count helps assess treatment response and guides adjustments if necessary. Adherence support programs and counseling are available to help individuals maintain consistent treatment routine. Prevention and early detection. Prevention strategies such as promoting safe sex. Okay. Condoms are sexy. Okay. Promoting safe sex practices, access to condoms, needle exchange programs, and pre-exposure prophylaxis, girl, which is PrEP. Child, just say PrEP. For individuals in high risk of HIV infection are essential to reducing new HIV transmissions. Early detection through regular HIV testing enables timely initiation of ART and helps prevent further transmission. So obviously the goal is to, practice safe sex and not get HIV infected. But if you do, it's important that you're getting tested regularly so that they can catch it early and put you on an ART plan tailored to your situation so that they can kind of get you to an undetectable status. You know what I mean? There's hope, people. Don't be scared of the doctor. Go get tested, okay? Let's see. Supportive care. In addition to antiretroviral therapy, supportive care focuses on managing HIV-related complications and maintaining overall health. This includes addressing opportunistic infections, managing coexisting health conditions, providing mental health support, and promoting healthy lifestyle through proper nutrition, exercise, and avoiding tobacco and substance abuse. HIV prevention and education. Ongoing education and awareness programs play a critical role in preventing new HIV infections, promoting knowledge about HIV transmission and prevention methods, and dispelling stigma and discrimination are key components of comprehensive HIV/AIDS management. Okay, okay? So, don't be ashamed. There's nothing to be ashamed of, okay? It's important. We've all had some risky sexual encounters before, but it is important that you do your part as an adult person and get tested regularly. You are not practicing safe sex if you're not getting tested. Don't leave it up to, I always wear condoms, whatever. You need to stay on top of your health. It is so important. And in this case, I want you to know that getting HIV isn't a death sentence. You can live a long, full life. And there's a whole ART seems like a very comprehensive, totalitarian way of, treating HIV. But it's important that if you do have it, get tested regularly so they can catch it early, and that you're, practicing safe sex by adhering to your ART regimen. And also, educating people, telling people about it, and reducing the stigma about it. The more we normalize it, the better it is. We need to talk about it openly so more people feel the pressure to get tested and have and practice safe sex, and just be aware of it. Okay? So just, again, another awareness thing. The top 3 people who are most affected by AIDS in this country are men who have sex with men, obviously, Black and African American. The Black and African American community, actually African American women, I think, have the highest rate of HIV in this country, which is, there's complications with that. That's a whole conversation that maybe we talk about at another time, but yeah, ciao, that's the whole thing. And the Hispanic Latinx community as well are super high risk. So again, if you fall into any of these categories or multiple of these categories, get your ass in the fucking clinic and get your ass checked, and practice safe sex. Just practice safe sex. It's very important for you to do that. In conclusion, okay, let me tell it. This was a fascist Christian-led genocide attempt. that didn't work. Let other people tell it. It's just history. It's Reagan doing Christian stuff. I mean, it is definitely, one of those things where it depends on who the messenger is and how you're framing the story. In my eyes, as a Black woman in this country, I see it as a genocide, period, because I've said it, I've repeated it, the length of time of inaction is just absolutely criminal and disgusting and disturbing. And the fact that a lot of people in this country were down with that is disgusting and disturbing. And the fact that we have to all live together is disgusting and disturbing. And those are the people who are raising people who are fucking up pride displays and getting mad about Bud Light cans and all that bullshit. We still live with these people. These people have children. They raise children. These people are an infection and a cancer to this country, child. I'm not trying to be, I'm being fucking for real. They've attempted the lives of every marginalized community in this country, and it's time for some solidarity, y'all. If you don't see my struggle as a Black woman in your struggle as being a gay person or a queer person or any person in the LGBTQIA family, child, solidarity needs to be formed. It's beyond race, it's beyond class, it's about being marginalized in general, and we need to rise up and take control of this bitch. Because I'm tired of these people. I'm tired. They need to be running scared because I'm done. Okay, I'm done. And it's just situations like these that bring it to mind in such a soberingly clear way how we as marginalized people are constantly forced to take the higher road and constantly forced to live in the same space and work with the same people who just have a difference of opinion. But really, it's like asking a severely abused woman to continue to work and live with their abuser. That's what we're doing. And it's time to fight back, child. It's time to make punching Nazis. These people are way too comfortable. It's time to bring back bitch slapping. It's time to bring back shame. It's time to bring back all of that. It's time to bring back bullying of Nazis. Let's do that. Let's do that, people. Okay? Sorry, my nails are ugly. All I have to say is, again, in conclusion, AIDS is not a death sentence. HIV is not a death sentence. Be and practice adult safe sex, especially even if you have a partner. I've been with my partner for 5 years, child. I get tested every year. It's important that you keep track of your health as an adult person engaging in adult things. You are not an adult person engaged if you refuse to do these things because you are acting like a kid. Go get tested, go get treated, go do your thing. It is not a death sentence. I just killed a fly with my bare hands. That's how powerful I am. Anyway, yeah. I just wanted to thank you for listening to me rant. I hope you understood where my rant was going. I hope you understand why I told this like a true crime story, because it fucking is. And again, stay tuned for this channel, baby. We are growing, we are small, we are mighty, we are doing the damn thing. We are trying. I am rebranding, baby. I'm coming back harder, more intense. Again, coming back. I also wanted to add on to my housekeeping that I fully plan on taking the audio of my videos and making them podcast episodes. So all of that's gonna be happening. We are rebranding in a big fat way. I hope you're excited. I just need to take a break. I hope you support me through that break. I love you guys. Watch all my videos. While I'm gone, I will respond to comments. I will still be active semi on this page. I just want you to understand that, mama, we're elevating, baby. We're elevating. When I come back, you'll know it. You'll feel it. You'll hear the ground shake, bitch. Okay. Anyway, happy Pride. Happy Pride. Happy Pride. Stay strong. I'm here for you. Solidarity, bitch. They're not gonna take this country over, bitch. We got this. Love you guys. I know this Pride has been particularly contentious because the state of the union right now, but really enjoy your Pride. Safe sex, safe partying, test your drugs, have Narcan, and be safe and sexy. Okay. I love you guys so much. I'm gonna miss you guys so much. Thank you for sticking with me while I was gone. But again, if you're new here and you like the vibe, subscribe, hit that notification bell, like and comment on the video. And if you're returning, like and comment on the video. All of you better watch my ads, hunty. And without further ado, Black Lives Matter and free Palestine until it's backwards. I love you. Mattis Swan out, but I'll be back.